everybody. This is Matt Harris with another edition of the Verado Podcast. Today, we have the pleasure of Dmitry of Access Solutions being our guest, a veteran in the e-commerce space. I will let Dmitry introduce himself. Welcome, Dmitry.
Hey, thanks for having me here. I've been doing this for 15 plus years. E-commerce, started as B2C expert and then kind of moved on to the B2B space. Excited to be here. I really love your work, Matt, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. We've had a few conversations before the podcast just talking about trends in B2B e-commerce and platform options. And there's a lot to digest. I think there's a lot of things that are changing very rapidly. We're obviously in our positions as agency owners advocating for our clients and our projects. But just tell me where do you see where do you first of all, let's get into your background and some of your expertise. Maybe explain to us where you feel like you bring a lot of value to the ecosystem and where you kind of have the right to have your right to win. Like projects like this are a really good fit for me because of my background and expertise, et cetera.
Sure. So I started my career as a software developer, but it was very interesting. The very first job that I got, I was even still in college. I was placed into a marketing department. It was just funny. There was a renovation project going on in the building. They had no place to sit me. So I couldn't go with IT, and it stuck. What it gave to me early on is the exposure to the marketing and the way the marketers think. So really, this was the best thing ever. I started to see what my clients were looking for. So I wasn't just solving a technical problem, which I think is a Achilles heel for many of the developers, and I'm one. We focus on the technology rather than the human problem. So as my career progressed, I was in business analysis. I was kind of put into all sorts of positions and just then eventually started my own agency. But I got all of those different perspectives. So one of them is a technology and a developer. I wish I could code more than I do. I haven't really been doing much hands-on for many years, but I still speak the dev language. That's a big advantage. Then marketing, because I was in the marketing space and marketing agency specifically for several years. So that was an interesting stint. Knowing how things look from the other side, being on friendly terms with marketers, because we all know tech and marketers, they do not typically get along well. Mm-hmm. I learned to get their perspective, and I find it extremely valuable. And the last one, as a business owner, I understand how business operates. I understand the cash flow and the accounting. You have to. And that's another weakness that I find in many e-commerce agencies. People are either marketing driven or technology driven. In B2B space specifically, you have to understand how the business runs before you start talking technology, let alone marketing.
Yeah. Those are great points. One of the things that I've been trying to one of the things that we've been talking about on the podcast, which I find is interesting, is how not only the agencies can be different. There's, I would say the marketing, let's just talk e-commerce agencies for a second. There's the ones that focus more on B2C. They're more like focused on brands. They even talk about their clients as brands. They're typically working alongside marketers in the brand and messaging departments. And they tend to like the really, really simple solutions. Like, just get it up so we can do our job. Mm-hmm. And usually Shopify wins that battle, right? Which makes sense. And then there's the old school B2B businesses that sometimes have a very small marketing department. They're very sales oriented, and they think of themselves as companies that build things. They don't even really think of themselves as brands, which I think is interesting. So it's almost like they're using a different vernacular. It's very sales driven as opposed to marketing driven. And then the solutions and the pain points are very different too, because you're talking about, so anyway, I don't know if you've experienced this too, but this has been in the last, whatever. I mean, I've been doing this for a while, but kind of eye-opening. And then I'm starting to notice patterns with other practitioners in the industry that are noticing the same things. Like, I'm wondering if you've had that experience.
Absolutely. It's very different. The types of projects, the type of people, transitioning from marketing driven e-commerce kind of B2C into B2B is actually pretty rude awakening for many, because you're
Mm-hmm.
such a superstar in one area and all of a sudden you start struggling. If you look at B2B, to me, e-commerce is really the tip of the iceberg, the B2B commerce. It's something that manifests itself in the surface, it's customer facing, but to make it work the way it's supposed to work, you really got to integrate everything behind the scenes. And most of the work happens, let me understand what's going on in your ERP. How does your product data gets uploaded? Do you have a PIM or not? And in half, like, yes, in big solid enterprise level businesses, you do have all of those systems as well, but processes seem to be slightly less complex, which is not true, not every single time, of course. I don't want to generalize too much, but you touch less of that complexity, and you typically have pre-built solutions. Whether it is a connector, it was not the case maybe 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, but the technology has matured. In 2025, kind of, hey, install an app, install a connector, configure this, configure that, boom, you're done, is kind of the general approach. In B2B, there's almost nothing out of the box. It's not because of the technology, it's because the businesses are run very differently.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to focus on very different things, and the pain points are very different. Just like you pointed out, get the website up and running and start driving the marketing traffic is the name of the game in B2C, which is why I still think we see a lot of WordPress, because it's a
Yeah.
great content hub. Not so much in B2B, though you still see the WordPress, but for very different reasons. So yes, those are like the only similarity almost is you have to use some of the same platforms, and you have a transaction, some kind of a sale happens at the end of the day. But the workflows are different, and the approaches to those types of clients are very different.
Have you messed around at all on your side with headless technologies?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, we just launched last week a very large project. It was fun, exciting, very engaging for the developers, I got to say.
Is there another way to say that?
Well, they loved it.
Yeah.
There were quite a few challenges, which again, my background is I actually built some custom products, and back in 2009 or 10, we had to build our own e-commerce platforms. Even Magento was really sort of not known much at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I have an experience building custom product from scratch, and I know the level of pain in the 80-20 Pareto principle is really strong. So the team was excited, and then they learned the hard way, which I liked, because you got to learn those lessons. But that's the thing about the headless commerce. It's a lot about building effectively a custom product. So you got to be prepared for those gotchas that simply do not exist with SaaS platforms or off-the-shelf open source platforms.
Yeah. It's funny. I've heard other people describe headless as a solution without a problem. I don't know if I agree with that. I think sometimes the industry gets excited about things, and there's kind of early adopters who struggle, and that it is sometimes the people that come on the second wave that kind of get it right, or the companies that have some kind of project or client that supports them to do it over again, get to version 2.0, and then you start to see things really function, and to the value of that new like paradigm, this kind of headless approach. So we'll see, but I think it's interesting because I think there's a B2C play for headless. I think there's a B2B play for headless, and I think time will tell. I also think there's an interesting kind of fight between open source and SaaS, and I think that battle will be going on for years. I don't think anyone's going to come out a clear victor. I think there's so many advantages to both arguments, and there's so many also, I would say, trade-offs with both options, that I think you're going to see this going on for a while. I wonder what your perspective is on that.
I tend to look at all of the platforms as tools. Tools exist for a reason, and no tool fits every single situation. If something is kind of a Swiss Army knife, that typically means it doesn't do a single thing really well.
Yeah.
Even if the blade is sharp, it's short or something. There is something like, for example, performance issues or the licensing costs or the complexity of managing this product. So if you got to look at the context of a particular customer and analyze it. Like Headless is certainly not for everyone. Sometimes it's being sold, well, it's nice because it creates basically a golden handcuff with a particular agency because it's a proprietary system. It's difficult to pick up for someone new. It's maybe more cost. Maybe it is just fun for the developers, and the agency owner happens to be heavily, has a tech background. So it has its place in more complex scenarios, especially if lots of systems are in the back end and you need to pull lots of things together. You can accomplish the exact same thing with open source platforms. So the choice at that point becomes more of a technical, pragmatical analysis. Do I want to be maintaining my infrastructure, the servers? How strong is your DevOps team? How comfortable is the client? What's their security sensitivity? Things like that. Because in the cloud, of course, now you're starting to get into, well, who owns my data? How safe is it? Things of that nature. So with SaaS, open source, headless, to me, this is more like, well, if I'm eating soup, I'm going to pick a spoon. If I'm eating, a steak, I need a fork. It depends on the specific circumstance.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and this is what you were saying before, just to kind of piggyback on top of it, is instead of being solutions, like when we do an engagement or an assessment or discovery or a new project comes in, focusing on the solution is sometimes the wrong approach. You want to focus on the problem, and sometimes that, I think that's what you were saying, right? That you have to listen first and figure out where those pain points are before you start predetermining what's the best solution. Especially
in B2B, where half the time the customers cannot articulate well what their problem is. You sort of, it's a difference. I love analogies. So it's a difference between a doctor and a vet. Mm-hmm. Vet cannot speak to the patient, and they have to figure it out. And it takes a lot of digging. So you can't just take some of those words and surface. And some of the most qualified people in the client organizations, the CFOs, CEOs, you'd think they know it all. The problem is the process and the systems are too complex for any single person to know it all, or they simply think differently, right? It would be detrimental to their position to think of every single minor aspect of running a particular workflow. It is our job as business analysts, solutions architects, technical architects to find that out, document for them. And all of a sudden you get a very natural response like, oh yeah, those two scenarios, 2 out of 15, they're actually really important. And yes, they're kind of outliers. Happen all the time and dozens of times on every single project. So that's a good point. And, not knowing what you don't know is a common problem. And we fight on the agency side on our projects with getting new clients to agree to paid discoveries. And to me, it's kind of like asking somebody to fix your car without lifting the hood. And I don't know, what's your strategy on that client engagement when you're trying to do an assessment? Are you going through a sales discovery that's free, and then you're trying to get into more of a technical discovery, which is paid, or how do you approach it? We have a pre-sale discovery, typically, depending on the complexity of the project, 1 or 2 sessions, about an hour long. We have a very thorough discovery questionnaire, which basically you end up getting into lots of forks in the road. Certain questions are not applicable to them, or they need to be rephrased. But I love starting out with a disclaimer. Hey, I'm going to ask a lot of questions. Some of them may sound silly, but I will still ask them because I have to. Because 1 time out of 10, you're going to tell me, no, that's actually applicable here. That's very important to us. And I'd rather not miss this one than look embarrassed asking you those 9 silly questions. And clients, first of all, they react very positively. Because if it's not applicable, it's like bam, bam, bam. The answers just fly out right away. But then we can sit down and think. And thanks to AI, you can actually start not just regurgitating the same old, but like basically come up with creative questions. What have I missed? What is typical to businesses with this kind of situation? So we end up with that pretty detailed document that gives a high level overview. And then we can estimate the project and say, well, this is the estimate. This is the scope of work. The way we see it, it's based on a number of assumptions. It needs to be reconfirmed. So we don't really give our clients an option to bail out of discovery, because we say discovery is a part of the planning phase of the project if you choose to go with us. But we've done a lot of legwork up front, and we've done it free of charge. At that time, you typically already won their trust, so they don't. I don't encounter too many pushbacks on don't do the discovery, because they instantly start seeing like, oh, in B2B, you really got to prove you understand their vertical. You've worked with someone like them before. It's actually an opportunity to position yourselves as a helpful advisor. I'm not here just to build a technology, but have you thought of this? Mm-hmm. It's a very interesting conversation when I talk to CEO or CFO and go like, are you realizing that by adding the services on top of a particular product to the price of the product, you're inflating the profit margin because you're not accounting for the labor cost, because you're not isolating that service as a separate line item on the order? And they're like, yeah, that's a great idea. So instantly you're starting to understand that you're on the same wavelength. And to me, that consultative pre-sale cycle is when we start building trust, and it's just a lot easier later down the road.
So what happens in the discovery phase? I guess this would be post-sale, right? Mm-hmm. You guys are doing a kind of a little bit of your planning and a little more in-depth discovery. What happens if you get one of those oops moments where the scope just kind of blew up on you because something that you didn't catch in pre-sales?
Well, luckily, it's not like a dramatic thing. Most of the time, I think we nailed it down well enough because, again, we almost like write down 150, 200 rows in a spreadsheet, depending on the complexity of the project. Here's everything. And we're not actually excluding anything. We're putting zeros against those line items, because missing a row basically means nothing. It could have been forgotten, or it could mean out of scope. When you put a zero against it, it means it's out of scope, and we put that explicit disclaimer. So, because one of the biggest risks is the change of heart. Oh, I realized I actually need it. So a lot of it goes into this due diligence, a lot of effort, but that's safety net for both sides, most importantly. It's not a CYA action for us. It also covers the risks for the client. So now the proportion, the level of complexity may grow. I see a lot of that in ERP integrations and data import. Those are two biggest things. If ERP was heavily customized and the business user wouldn't know, or it's an outdated version, for example, and its integration capabilities are lacking, yes, you're on a 5-year-old version of Sage X3 or something like that.
Yeah. So you're talking about e-commerce projects too, right? Not ERP replatforming projects.
No, we do not do ERP replatforming, though we have been consulting even in the selection process, absolutely, and recommending the ERP implementation teams, but we would be kind of watching from the sidelines for that part.
Yeah, we're I was thinking more about the ERP replatforming in terms of paid discovery, because it's really tricky to scope it without. Plus, it's collaborative. So it's kind of like you're dividing the work up between yourselves and the clients, where I think with an e-commerce build, you can kind of work within your own team for most of the work. You have to get, data and responses from the client, obviously, but the ERP, you're talking about changing workflows, training. There's a lot of collaborative work, but anyway, I want to take a step back and just kind of pivot on this conversation a little bit, because one of the things that I've noticed is the language we use to describe what we're doing can actually put people off. A lot of us that have been in the industry for a while use a lot of acronyms. We presume that people know what we're talking about, but if they're not native to the industry, they don't really know what we're talking about. A lot of people don't know what an ERP is. They might be using one. They just don't refer to it as an ERP. which is, for the record, enterprise resource planning. Just think of it as a fancy accounting system with a lot of other stuff attached, inventories, warehousing and stuff. This is for whoever's listening to the podcast. But I've been thinking about talking more about retooling businesses, rebuilding businesses, restoring businesses. I think this idea of digital transformation gets kind of overused, and it's a little bit a turnoff to people that might be on the manufacturing or distribution of an older legacy business. This idea of digital transformation seems like, something that's going to, yeah, it's a buzzword, but it's also going to fundamentally change what we're doing. And I think really we're not going to just fundamentally, you're still going to be making stuff. You're still going to be pushing it into the supply chain. You're still going to be going through your procurement processes. You're going to still be, enabling your sales teams. It's all about making that stuff better and a little bit faster and more efficient. And I think that sometimes the friction between our industry and the clients that we're trying to help in the B2B space is the language we use. And sometimes it puts people off. And I'm wondering if you've encountered that.
Lots of times.
Yeah.
I generally, because I had to work more with the client side, the marketing side, tech jargon also is not helpful there. So I kind of learned not to use it too much, but I'm sure I'm guilty as charged. I still do too much. Train my team to speak to the clients more like a smart 6th, 7th grader, not a derogatory way, God forbid, but more like, well, that's their level of competence and understanding of the particular thing that we're trying to attack here. So give them an introduction. Make sure to ask frequently the question, do you follow me? Do I need to elaborate on this? It helps. That's one of the big reasons why I use analogies a lot. It just became habitual. And it actually sticks. So simplify it. There is one more thing that's interesting about B2B versus B2C I've noticed. In B2B, you are working with a select group of people. A lot of processes happen just in the back office. Your customers are repeat customers, so you get a chance to establish their relationship, actually sort of train them up over time. They know who to reach out to, what kind of products, what your process is. That's a luxury. In B2C space, you have to be pretty much, you're like in the crowd. Imagine being just a concession stand at a busy stadium. Why are you better than any guy down the aisle? So you really have to stand out. And in B2C space, people are really trained. They have to survive. They have to know a lot of this stuff, a lot of this jargon. In B2B, you heavily focus on the relationship. You don't have to know all of that jargon, whether it's tech, marketing, or accounting. So the other side of that is approach to building those IT systems, broadly speaking, any piece of software. Because it's an internal or a friendly environment, you don't have to care about it being bulletproof. It's like me having to live with inconvenience in my own backyard. I know there is a hole somewhere, just don't go there, don't step into it. You can't do that in a public walk area. So the same principle applies here. QA, it does not really, as a principle, does not stick well in B2B. I have to re-explain the importance every single time. And no matter how much we try, UAT, user acceptance testing, never gets done to a level of thoroughness I would personally feel comfortable.
Yep.
It's always an afterthought, and it's surprising that sometimes people do the last round of testing. I'll a real life example: processing the payment end to end, ensuring that the money hits the bank. Not just like you got a success message, but actually it was a real production credit card, like live, not the development credit card or any other type of transaction, and that the money settled in your bank. Because if you may have not connected properly to your bank account, your payment processor. People do that like 2 hours prior to go live. Sometimes they do that after.
This gets me back to thinking, Dmitry, about how so much of the old school B2B businesses are happening with, not like you said, relationships, but they're actually going and meeting physically and going to trade shows and doing a lot of handshake deals, which is very different than, B2C.
It is happening for a good reason. I can actually relate to that as a business owner. For example, I wouldn't be just switching to a different tool if I'm not sure that the hassle of switching to a different tool, it could be a service, say DocuSign. It could be, maybe it's my diagram charting tool. Maybe it's an Office package. Because not only I have the lift, I also have the risk. What if that tool actually doesn't work as well as I expect it to? The same problem, I think, stands in front of the B2B businesses, but it's probably magnitude of 10 or something like that. In their business, it's not a one-time transaction. Like me going on Amazon and buying something from an basically anonymous store from the marketplace, and my need is satisfied for the next 5 years. This is repeat business, and their own business depends on the quality of the product that they're receiving or the service they're receiving from their suppliers. So reliability is often also a part of this whole relationship game, right? Will I get my stuff when I need it? Will they bump me up the list because I'm in a dire situation, someone else isn't? They were in front of me, but they will let me go first. Those are real situations, so human touch is crucial there. Absolutely. And because of that mentality, organizational mentality, it also translates on the agency relationship.
Yeah. And also, it's accountability. And I think the fact that, like, all right, we might get some deals going here. We might start doing work together. These wholesale numbers are crazy. Like, there's some of these businesses, they seem like small mom and pop businesses, but a relationship can end up being $2 to $3 to $4 million of orders every year. So the fact that you can get in front of that person and shake their hand and look them in the eye and say, we're doing business together, that really matters to them. And it's a very different, it's an old school world, but I don't see it dying off anytime soon. And I think I might have had a different opinion about this 10 years ago, but now that I've kind of been in the trenches and gotten to know these people and gotten to know these companies, first off, I'd like to say, just as a disclaimer, amazing companies that I've been working with and getting to know, and amazing legacies of business. And I think, frankly, we should be proud of these businesses, and we should be honored to be able to help them. I don't want to ridicule them and say they're out of touch, because I think that sometimes becomes the thread of these conversations. And I've been more impressed with the durability, the loyalty these businesses have to their partners and to their staff and to their communities. And I think it's kind of the lifeblood of the country in the United States and others countries as well. These small regional, supply chain businesses, manufacturers and distributors. So I think that it gets back to that listening piece, because there's stuff that they can learn from us and there's stuff that we can help them with, but there's a lot we can learn from them. And I think that is something that we need to kind of, like, in our industry, kind of get off our high horses a little bit and say, listen, I don't know everything. I'm pretty good at what I do, but there's businesses that are 50 to 60 years old who've been successful that whole time. And maybe I should just shut up and listen to them for a little bit and learn something and then start to try to help. That's been my kind of, theme I've been working at with Verado and some of the other practitioners that I'm working with, like yourself, is that, we are working in different worlds and we're using different languages, but that's not a value judgment. It's just different, right?
I'm there with you. First of all, being on a high horse all the time, it serves nothing but my ego, but then it's just a higher horse to fall off eventually.
Yeah.
So we need to get a little more humble and understand what contributed to that stability and success of the business. I think that in 2025, like starting last year, obviously the topic of AI had to come up in our conversation at some point. So here
we go.
We are on the verge of something happening. I don't know yet. I like AI. I'm experimenting with it all the time. My outlook is that it's it's never going to be nearly as good, nearly as bad. It's going to be somewhere in the middle, and it's not going to play out the way everyone's thinking. Well, maybe some visionaries in Silicon Valley already know the path, not me right now. It's a very helpful tool that it would be silly to not to use, especially if it's affordable, because it solves a lot of practical issues efficiently and at a low cost, even if it's not ideal. But if we compare it to, a human being, humans are not perfect either. But AI is there on demand when you need it, as much as you need it. So AI to me is a little bit of that genie in the bottle that can potentially turn things upside down. It can lead to consequence. Internet was just kind of glorified extension of what was there before. There were data interchanges, like people had modems and people had faxes, and EDI was invented in early 80s, if not late 70s. So, okay, it became consumerized technology in the late 90s, but internet was not anything new to the corporate sector fundamentally. So I'm seeing AI is actually something being dramatically different that's new to both a corporate and consumer. And it might impact what's going on, because it may give certain businesses that start using not necessarily AI as a purpose, but tools that are really efficient and AI driven, that level of competitive edge that they outcompete the old school businesses. I 100% think human relationship matters tremendously, and people just going full digital AI is not the way to go. But if you're in the exact opposite camp, it's also a big risk right now. It's basically my message to everyone is be open-minded, be willing to experiment, because I personally feel like it's different from the previous technological shifts we've been observing in the last quarter century or so.
Yeah, man, I'm 100% there with you. I've used the metaphor of like going into someone's place of business and pulling the fire alarm. And I don't think that's a good idea ever. I think you go in and you listen and stay humble and try to figure out what their problems are. I think on this podcast, in a general sense, in terms of what's going to happen in the next 5 years, I'm pulling the fire alarm. Like, there's going to be a big disruption. And it's not that you have to panic, it's that you have to stay aware.
Mm-hmm.
And carve out a part of your business, put a budget to it, and work on making some incremental changes. Don't be afraid. Don't turn a blind eye to this technology or technology helping your business or partnering with someone like Dmitry, right? Engage with Dmitry, engage with people like Dmitry, tell them your story and see if they can't, or, make small changes. So the fire alarm is the sense that we have to stay alert. The fire alarm is not you have to change everything you're doing right now this year. Absolutely 100% not. But we're all going on a 5-year journey or 10-year journey together. And the people that are listening and collaborating with maybe people outside of their comfort zone and typical domain are going to benefit. And that means old school industry people working with us and us working with old school industry people. That's where I think you're going to see the most gains. And I think it takes a little bit of humility on both sides for us to kind of sync up and help each other. But I do see that, like you said, AI, and it's, there's also, other technologies that are going to be disruptive. AI might just be the tip of the iceberg. But you've got, crypto technologies and quantum computing coming. So I don't know what that's going to do, but it sounds like I'm preaching, Dmitry, but I'm right there with you. I think it's going to be super interesting. And, when the internet hit was when I basically started my career, when the web started in 93, and I really got going in 95, but I was toying around it in 93. And my mom had a publishing company. She printed books, directories, print directories for the Chamber of Commerce, and my industry put her industry out of business. So it happens, right? I've seen it happen. Anyway, I think there's big changes coming.
You could argue that all of those directories, they exist online. It changed the form, but the need stayed the same, right? Because nothing's new under the moon. I met with somebody at one of the trade shows, as a matter of fact, and Amazon seems so unique and disruptive. But then this person told me, hey, come on, back in the 70s, there would be Sears catalog or something like that, and you would just dial in and then you would go and pick up from the warehouse or something like that. And it's really just digitizing that same idea. So certain ideas and certain business models we're observing, they're hundreds, literally hundreds, if not millennia old, but in a nicer, shinier packaging. So AI is not inventing something new. It just makes, well, maybe I'm wrong, actually, probably wrong in a few areas, but practical application in B2B commerce or e-commerce in general, it just makes certain things more efficient, but you're still running the same fundamental operation. It's almost like where we started. Find a problem and then solve it, as opposed to obsessing with AI as being a solution or a demon of some sort. No, it's a practical tool. Apply it to your pain points.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is just a tool. That's the thing. But it's a tool that might make you better and faster. And more importantly, it might make your competition better and faster. So if you're not using the tool and they might have an advantage over you. So you have to stay aware. I mean, in a metaphor sense, I remember doing construction work on the side back in the 80s and 90s. And, everything had a cord attached. And you'd have these old school guys with these skill saws with a cord attached. And they were beautiful saws, worm drive, powerful, smooth. And they're like, I'm never using a cordless saw. That's ridiculous. They have, now they're all using cordless saws, but they're doing the same job. They're still cutting wood, right? But it's just, they're faster and more efficient. So It's just a tool, right? Yeah. All right. So Dmitry, I could talk to you forever, man, but we'll save some of this for another podcast, maybe down the road.
I'd love to.
Okay. Very cool. So folks, this is Dmitry Khan, Access Solution, veteran in the e-commerce space, the B2B space. I hope I said that right, Dmitry.
You did. Absolutely.
All right. Awesome. This is Verado. It's a YouTube channel / podcast. Catch it where you catch most of your podcasts. I appreciate your time today, Dmitry. And we will sign off with that. Thank you very much.